If you're anything like me, ever since The Penguin ended last week, all I could think about is the Batman 2 and where the Batman epic crime saga story is going to go next. More specifically, who is going to be the main villain of the highly anticipated sequel, which is set to release October 2nd, 2026. In this video, we're going to talk about a bunch of different villains that could possibly take center stage based on the story, what has been rumored, and of course, just some that I personally want to see in this Matt Reeves universe. Obviously, these are just theories and guesses, so if you have a better idea or there's a specific villain that you want to see in the Batman 2, make sure to let me know in the comments down below, or just tell me what in general you want to see from the Batman 2. First up, let's talk about the obvious one, that being the Penguin. We know that the Penguin is going to play a role in the Batman 2. However, as the main villain, it's very possible, but as of right now, I think I lean towards no. He will definitely be one of the villains in the film, but I do believe there will be a villain that probably gets a little bit more screen time than him. According to Colin Farrell, the Penguin is set to have about 5 or 6 scenes in the Batman 2, a substantial role no doubt, and more screen time the better in my opinion, just with how amazing of a character the Penguin has turned into in this universe, but it feels a little light in order to be the main villain of a film that most likely is going to be north of 2.5 hours long. Additionally, it seems like the Penguin is a character that they want to build up and is going to be in the third film as well. This has been confirmed by Colin Farrell. When he originally signed on to do the Batman, he signed on to do 3 films, and of course, that doesn't mean that you can't be the main villain in the second film and then show up in a later film, but I do think there's more to build upon, and we see the Penguin becoming more of what the Penguin we associate with in the comics, and it's going to be more of Oz kind of manipulating things behind the scenes, most likely kind of getting higher into high society, and maybe being our entry point into learning possibly about the Court of Owls, which we'll talk about later. But in terms of a story sense, this obviously makes the most sense and is the most likely due to where the Penguin show ends. The Penguin is on Batman's radar, and I do think this could set up for a really interesting story, especially if you were to pair Penguin with some muscle. Now, that doesn't mean you have to do a story where like the Penguin puts out a contract to kill the Bat. You could do a variety of different things. Of course, you could just have the Penguin and a more physical villain separate of him within the story, or if you were going to just solely focus on the Penguin, I do think there's a lot to do there, but I do honestly really like the idea of the Penguin viewing the Batman is the only thing that could stand in his way for him to achieve all of his goals, and obviously, as smart as Oz is and how he can get out of a lot of things and manipulate people, he cannot challenge the Bat one-on-one. So if you were to put out a contract and get the likes of a Deathstroke, a KG Beast, or whatever DC mercenary you want, I think that would be a really awesome story, and it would allow Rob to go toe-to-toe with a more physical villain, which I don't think is necessary, just like in the Batman 1 where he wasn't fighting some great hand-to-hand combatant. But I would really like to see this Batman go toe-to-toe with another mercenary that can at least challenge him hand-to-hand. Another one I want to get off the bat right away is the Joker. Now, I'm going to be honest, I truly have no idea what role Joker is going to play in this universe, but I feel pretty confident in saying that he is not going to be the main villain of the sequel. Now, rumors have swirled that Barry Keoghan is going to maybe star in his own HBO show within the Matt Reeves universe, which, again, take that with a grain of salt. All of these leaks nowadays, you really never know. But the idea, you have an amazing actor in Barry Keoghan, you probably do want to utilize him. Now, I do understand that there is a little Joker burnout going around, but personally, the way I view it, we haven't seen Batman and Joker go toe-to-toe on the big screen in almost 20 years when this sequel releases, and I think we're long overdue. I know some people are burnt out, and if you are, I'm definitely not saying you're wrong. It's just my own personal opinion, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that I think Barry Keoghan is actually just such a phenomenal casting. I really did like the deleted scene. I didn't really like his scene within the Batman, but the deleted scene I think was phenomenal, and it made me want to see more of this Joker with this specific version of Batman, so I do want to see it expanded upon, but it doesn't feel like the Batman 2 is the place where we're going to see a lot more of him. I do think it's very likely that he has a couple of scenes within the film. It's just, I think they're going to tackle more about the elites in Gotham, kind of the corruption within the politics in the city, and I just don't really know if the Joker is really where you want to go in this story, or at least that's not what it really sets up in my opinion. I'm sure they could make it work if they did, and I trust Matt wholeheartedly. They clearly seem to want to use Barry Keoghan's Joker, but I just don't think it's this film. It does seem like a matter of time, as Barry Keoghan seems very interested to jump back into the role, and they clearly seem to want to incorporate him into this universe. Another character I just want to get out of the way quick is Harvey Dent. Now, it's been heavily rumored that Harvey Dent is going to make an appearance in the Batman 2, and from a story sense, it makes a lot of sense considering the last DA of Gotham got his head blown off in the first film. However, if Harvey Dent is going to appear in the Batman 2, I really kind of just hope it's just Harvey Dent. Now, I know you can introduce Harvey and turn him into Two-Face in a singular film and do a phenomenal job, but I don't know if you want to do that in a Batman sequel because it does feel like you would be a little too similar to perhaps a Batman sequel that came out in 2008, and honestly, I want them to build towards Two-Face if they're going to at some point introduce Two-Face into this world. I just want to see the anger slowly consuming Harvey, and I just think Harvey's a phenomenal character. So in this film, I don't think they're going to go the Two-Face route. I think you might have Harvey Dent, and perhaps he's one of the leaders of the anti-corruption task force that Bella Real is setting up, and he's just, kind of more on the good side in this film, and I think that'd be really fun to see. Next up, let's talk about the one that honestly I think when it comes to the Batman 2 and what I've seen on interactions through YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, whatever social media you want to talk about, the one that fans seem to want to see the most is Mr. Freeze. Now, of course, that's not just because the Batman 2 is going to be set within winter, even though I do think it sets the stage perfectly, and just the idea of Batman versus Mr. Freeze in winter with Greg Fraser as cinematographer sounds just like epic and awesome movie. It's because Mr. Freeze has become a fan favorite and honestly hasn't been done right on the big screen, even though he maybe did make an appearance in a movie in the 90s, but we don't talk about that Batman film. Now, of course, the question is, would Matt Reeves tackle a villain like Mr. Freeze due to the fantastical nature of the character? Now, I do think Mr. Freeze is close enough where you could just make up some random science and make it sound realistic. Obviously, people like me who are fucking stupid aren't gonna know the difference, so I'll be willing to blur the lines of reality to do a character like Mr. Freeze, and I just think it's a character that is really interesting, and I think for this Batman in particular, I would really like to see a villain that Batman has some sort of level of sympathy for, almost with, Mr. Freeze and his constant pursuit to heal his wife. I just think it's a really interesting, kind of relationship that Mr. Freeze and Batman sometimes do. Now, of course, there's versions where Mr. Freeze is just kind of a psycho batshit character, but if you focus more on Nora and the tragedy of Mr. Freeze, I think this could make for an immensely emotional film and truly an amazing sequel to the Batman. Additionally, I think this is kind of one of the villains I was talking about earlier when talking about the Penguin that you could pair with Penguin in the Batman 2 and make for a really interesting sequel that not only tackles the corruption and the city politics of Gotham, which this universe is really diving deeper into, but it also gives Batman more of a physical threat and honestly a bit more of an emotional one as well. Now let's talk about Scarecrow, which is a villain that's been on a lot of people's minds over the last week, considering a bunch of Easter eggs were discovered within episode 4 of the Penguin that seemed to showcase a glove and a mask that very much resembles what the Scarecrow would use in Julian Rush's office. Now, we don't know if the rumor about Julian Rush being Dr. Crane within the production of the Penguin was changed or whether any validity to that story is true, but the fact that they left those Easter eggs within the scene in the actual episode, it does seem like there were some plans, or at least they wanted to leave a trail of breadcrumbs for the Scarecrow to possibly appear in a future project, and I honestly think this is a phenomenal villain that Matt Reeves would do amazing things with. However, I do think if they were going to use Scarecrow within the Batman 2, they probably would have used the Penguin to set it up a little bit more. Now, obviously, Julian Rush does play a role within the show, but he's most certainly not one of the main characters. He just kind of is a point to move the story forward, but I think Scarecrow would be awesome, and Matt Reeves would absolutely kill it, but, I just don't know why you wouldn't have showcased that a little bit more and kind of built a little bit closer towards that if he was going to play a major role. It's very well possible, but I just don't see it making story sense, even though I think it would be phenomenal, and hopefully Scarecrow does get another crack on the big screen. That's not to say he was mishandled within the Dark Knight trilogy at all. I just wish he had absolutely more screen time, because the Scarecrow moments in the Dark Knight trilogy were honestly some of my favorite. Next up is Hush, and this has probably been one of the top 2 most talked about villain choices when it comes to the Batman 2, due to the Easter eggs that were in the first Batman film. Of course, the mention of Edward Elliot and Hush over the picture of Thomas Wayne. Hush is a villain that has become hugely popular over the last decade plus. Additionally, he's a character that is yet to make his appearance on the big screen, which I do think is always an added bonus for fans, because we do want to see new villains and new characters get a chance to shine on the big screen. We do not want to see the same stories retold again and again, and honestly, I think that's part of the reason I think Hush most likely won't be in the Batman 2, because it seems like a lot of the Riddler within the Batman did share a lot of the same ideas as Hush. Now, of course, it's not a one-for-one comparison, but I just think you'd be kind of retreading a story that you kind of told a little bit in the first film. Now, there are ways, of course, to differentiate it. As the Riddler is greatly overhauled, I'm sure Matt Reeves would have a lot of different ideas of how to overhaul the character of Hush. But if they do end up doing this, I really do hope they utilize the story where Hush does steal Bruce's identity, because I think it makes for a far more compelling story. Now, this is obviously not something that Hush is in every iteration of character, but I think if you're going to do it on the big screen, this is the best way to do it for a couple of different reasons. First off, in the Batman 2, we do think that Bruce Wayne is going to be making a more concerted effort to make appearances as Bruce Wayne and, being, more involved in philanthropy within the city and trying to do more good within the city. It would be an absolute wrench to throw in those plans if somebody is impersonating him and perhaps committing murder or ruining his financial life. I think the murder thing and Bruce Wayne being framed for murder, you could really dive into maybe a huge trial of Bruce Wayne, which could be really interesting. And just kind of from my own personal taste, I think Robert Pattinson would absolutely kill it if he had the opportunity to play not only Bruce Wayne, but the villain in the Batman 2. Now finally, let's talk about the Court of Owls, and if I'm being 100% honest here, I am almost 100% certain that they are going to show up at some point in this universe. I'm just not necessarily sure it is going to be in the Batman 2. Now, of course, the Court of Owls has had some teases throughout the Batman and the Penguin. Some people like to point out the curtains within the courthouse during the finale of the Penguin. Of course, the card that had the owl on it. But it's really not those Easter eggs that make me believe the Court of Owls are going to show up. It's just because they make so much sense for this universe and the story that Matt Reeves is telling. So much of the story in this universe has been about the systematic greed and corruption that has plagued Gotham City, and what group better represents that than the Court of Owls. And I definitely think, even though there are some fantastical elements, especially with the talons, you could easily modify things to fit more in this realistic world that Matt Reeves has tried to build. However, I do think it's very possible that this is a group that is further unveiled within the Batman 2 and then really is the focus of, say, the Batman 3. I do think a slow build towards the Court of Owls makes a lot of sense. But just read this quote from Matt Reeves. Doesn't your mind immediately go to the Court of Owls? It's going to dig into the epic story about deeper corruption, and it goes into places Bruce Wayne couldn't even anticipate in the first one. The seeds of where this goes are all in the first movie, and it expands in a way that will show you aspects of the character you never got to see. Batman is constantly battling these forces, but these forces can't be entirely exercised, so the next movie delves deeper into that. I mean, that just sounds like a Court of Owls story. Again, I do think they are going to show up in this universe. I am almost certain about that, but is it going to be in the second film? I'm not sure. I think this is a group that would be better served to build towards, and maybe kind of the Penguin, again, as he's getting higher up, kind of playing more in politics within the city. Maybe he is our entry point into learning more about the actual group that has been controlling the city for hundreds of years, and perhaps we finally get the reveal at the end of the Batman 2 setting up the third film. I think that makes a lot of sense, but I definitely do think it's very likely that their presence is going to be felt. I just don't think it's going to be as the main villain in this. But I would say if I had to put a betting favorite for the Batman 3, it's the Court of Owls. Now finally, I want to talk about some villains that I've seen talked about a lot and fans really do want to see in a Batman film at some point, but I just don't think they were worth really delving into too much because I just don't see them fitting in this universe, and I honestly think they probably fit better within James Gunn's DCU. First up, Killer Croc. I know, it's an awesome setting for Killer Croc, especially when half the city is flooded, but Matt Reeves is not going to tackle Killer Croc. It doesn't work within the story, and he obviously doesn't want to go too fantastical, but I really do hope we see a proper version of Killer Croc soon. And another villain that's very similar to Killer Croc is Man-Bat, and it just doesn't fit in this universe. But I do also think that Man-Bat, I don't want to get too ahead of myself here, but if the DCU is going to be doing a Batman and Son adaptation, it's very possible that we are going to see Man-Bat in The Brave and the Bold, which I think would be so awesome, and I really do hope he makes an appearance because I just think you could do so much, especially if you really lean into kind of the horror aspects of Man-Bat. But yeah, again, just doesn't fit for this universe, but I would really like to see them. However, that wraps up my list. Let me know in the comments down below what you want to see from the Batman 2. If there's a specific villain I didn't talk about in this video, let me know and tell me why that is the villain that needs to be in the Batman 2. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all in another video.